We saw football. Some was good, some was bad. But ultimately, highlights of our weekend, SA20
No, ultimate highlights is seeing my crush.
at the SA20.
At the SA20, yes.
If you go to SA20, either you'll get good cricket or you get to see your crush.
Welcome back to our YouTube channel. Welcome back to Two Up Front. My name is Jay. And as always, I'm joined by Chuck. Chuck, how you doing?
Oh, good, man. I don't really know what's my answer. At least you forced me, even if I want to move away from it. Happy people once again. So yeah, I'm good, man. Both my teams won one of those weekends, so I'm good, man.
You know, Chuck, it was a good weekend for me, right? Even though some results didn't go the right way. Because more than sports, I saw my crush at the stadium, up close. She was right there.
We can't divulge.
No, we cannot say who it is because it is a public figure, of course.
Conflict of interest.
She was right there. Yeah. But anyway, you are good, of course. And the reason you are good, happy people, is because Orlando Pirates have made it through the group stages of the CAF Champions League official after the 2-1 victory over the weekend against CR Belouizdad. And Chuck, we both sat here upon qualification for the Champions League, getting to group stages, talking about what our expectations for Orlando Pirates is that they should at least get out of the group, which they've now done. Now that Orlando Pirates have qualified out of the group stages of the CAF Champions League, how far do you think they can go?
Man, it sounds very, very optimistic and very brave to say all the way to the final, because when you qualify out the group stages, you're automatically in the quarterfinals. And I should think they should be able to win that first tie. And I think at that point, when you're in the semis, it's a toss-up. Anything can happen. And my mood, or rather my confidence, is bolstered by the fact that when we first played Al Ahly at home, we were all over them. And yes, we know that they don't always play adventurous when they're away from home. They park the bus sometimes when they need to. And then in Cairo, obviously, they play a much better brand of football. But when I contrast the two games against CR Belouizdad, when we went away, we scored 2 early goals. They came back, they dominated the second half. I thought to myself, that team dominated in the second half. They beat Al Ahly. They're going to be a good opponent when they come to Orlando. But we handled them quite comfortably. So that alone gives me so much confidence. When I look at the stats as well, that apart from Al Ahly, if I'm not mistaken, who have scored 12 goals in the group phases, we are amongst the top goal scorers, I think, amongst 3 other teams who scored 8. Everyone else has scored less goals. So for me, goals output, the level of competition that we've faced and how we've acquitted ourselves. When I look at Usbisi and Osasani, that partnership seems to be as good as the one next to Nonda, because there's an understanding, there's leadership, it's solid at the back. When I look at the likes of Makaula, I think for me, one of the best games for Van Rooyen. I've always said to myself, which is good going forward, but going back, he's reactive. He's never quite in the right spot. He's good. He relies too much on his pace to catch up. But I think in this game, he was solid. He was great performer. So I think just based on that, Jay, just the feeling in terms of how we play and how we look against African opposition, I think, man, give us whoever in the quarterfinals and we'll handle business. And in the semis, we'll see. So I think confidence says all the way to the final.
I think Paris can go to the final as well. And maybe you might be wondering, why not just say they can win it, right? Because I think winning the Champions League final is an absolutely different game as opposed to getting there. And we've seen South African teams, specifically, I'll mention, get to the final of a Champions League. We saw Kaizer Chiefs unfancied a few seasons ago. We've seen Pirates multiple times. We've seen Sundowns multiple times. The first time Sundowns lost to Al Ahly and then won it. We know Pirates won it, of course, back in the day. And then when they went to the final again, they lost it. Kaizer Chiefs went to the final and they lost the final. And you always have to account for Al Ahly, right? Regardless of what happens with their results in the group stages, because as you mentioned, we saw Al Ahly come to Orlando Stadium and they didn't come to play. And that might fill you with confidence as a Pirates fan in the same way that as a Sundowns fan, when you saw Sundowns put 5 past Al Ahly, that fills you with confidence that this is your season, you know. But it's a totally different game for those guys, particularly these teams for the North, especially Al Ahly, when they're then in the final. They just know how to win finals. They know how to win a Champions League final. So I think it might be a too bold a step to say that I think they'll win the Champions League, but they are in with a chance to win the Champions League final. But I think getting to the final, because that includes games at Orlando. And that is very important for me. The biggest factor why I think Orlando Pirates can make it all the way to the finals, because they truly have a home ground advantage. And it's the altitude, it's the weather when you're playing against the northern teams during, like, in the afternoon. Especially it is the fans, and it is how that relationship between the fans and this particular team has continued to develop under the tutelage of Coach Jose Rivero. Because Coach Jose Rivero, the more I've listened to him post match in press conferences, as well as then seeing continuously, especially this season, his reaction to the crowd on the sidelines is very passionate, and his passion is directed towards the fans. He's I know this sounds impossible, but he's maintaining eye contact, it feels like, with the fans, and he's drawing them into backing this team, which is the hypothesis that was given by the main man behind Talking Buccaneers when we spoke to him about what is happening in Orlando, where about Tito specifically, actually, and he gave us the hypothesis that he thinks that the coach Jose Rivera is instructing Tito to stand on the ball, because when that happens, and we experienced this when we were in Orlando, and I've joked about this, that Tito could sneeze and the Pirates faithful, hey Tito, but there's an understanding that Coach Jose Rivera has with regards to his players, their personalities. Orlando Stadium, the personality of the Ghost, the humble people who are also the manufacturers of mob justice football, right? That when it comes together, Chuck, that is a cauldron. It's what you think about when you think about Champions League in Europe, like Champions League nights at Anfield, or when you have to go to Old Trafford, when like United were in their pomp, or when you have to go to the Bernabeu. You know, there's just an electricity, and I see that. I feel that when I'm watching Orlando Pirates at home. Orlando Pirates have a genuine home ground advantage, and I think then with the elements of everything else that I mentioned, along with the style of play, which lends itself to like being backed by the momentum that is given to you by the crowd. When it is one touch, two touch football, when it is very exciting, when it is Rele doing his thing, when it is Tito doing his thing, when it is Ngota going past his fullback, and when it is Dino overlapping and underlapping, and when it is Hoto showing up everywhere he's showing up and like bombarding the opposition box, I think anyone on the continent of Africa who then has to come to Orlando and play against all of that, they're going to find it difficult. And you're going to have that in the quarterfinals, you're going to have that in the semifinals. And yeah, you mentioned the goals. It's not just exciting. There are goals that are attached to the style of play. So I think those things, and as I mentioned before on our channel, that I do think this is Coach Jose Rivera's last season, based on what I saw with his emotions coming out after winning the MTN8 for a third consecutive time, and the statement we saw with regards to how he's missing his family, he's here without his family, and there's just something there where if it is his last dance, it feels as though it would be fitting, and it seems as if there's that messaging that has gone across to the team that it has to be the Champions League or the league or both in a utopian world. So yeah, I think Orlando Pirates can make it all the way to the final, and the main reason is the Orlando faithful, the faithful at Orlando Stadium.
So you believe Rivera is not like you say Ramovich when he says family, probably is family if he does
Probably,
leave.
but you can never know these coaches, right?
Football, yeah. I think Jay, lastly for me, I think it would be hard to find a team that will outwork Pirates. The work rate of those boys, I think, gives them an edge. I think, especially at Orlando, as you say as well, because I think the first words that I saw of coming out of Makaula's mouth at full time was "Epo Nkatele." I don't know who he was talking to, and I was like, I know why, because you guys were running up and down on you, and it's hard to beat a team that's always all in. Whether it's attack, whether it's defend, they're all in and they're always giving everything. And I think that lends itself to the fans also appreciating the display, because you can tell the guys are playing for the badge. So I think Pirates are, on a good season. If they can maintain this form throughout the season, if they can maintain for years, I'll be happy. But Jay, if we contrast to people, or rather a team who has been accustomed and used to playing CAF Champions League football, we've been flying the South African flag for all of us, I guess, because Pirates are not there, Chiefs are not there, Stellies have only just come into CAF competitions right now. Mamelodi Sundowns, Jay, with where they are, a point away from qualification, and the number of goals that they've scored as well. They haven't scored a lot of goals. With where they are in the group, obviously on the verge of qualifying, playing at home in their next game, do you believe that they're still favourites? And how far do you think that this team can go? Because they're not as dominant as we expected.
Yeah, Chuck, it's hard to say favorites, right? But then when I think about what else is happening in the Champions League, the most impressive teams have been in the same in the same group, which is Orlando Pirates and Al Ahly, right? When you then think of Esperance, they've qualified as well. I just forgot who's second in their group, and they went all the way to the final. Then you have one of the semifinals from last season, TP Mazembe, who are bottom of their group. And given that's the group that most people thought is the group of death. But it tells you the nature of African football, right? And what I mean is it doesn't look like there's a team that is absolutely dominant. So even though I recognize that Sundowns have taken a step backwards, the feeling is not, man, they are so far behind team A, B, C, and D. But at that same time, they don't feel like favorites. At the moment, they do not feel like favorites. When you consider what has happened with Sundowns recently, where there's been a coaching change, and it feels as if Miguel Cardoso is continuing to learn this team. I watched the match over the weekend against Maniema, right? And I thought he didn't quite get his personnel right. I don't think you can play Stellies and Ribeiro together in the same team because Stellies does not stay in the box as a striker. He continues to drop. When he drops, and the front three is him, Reyners, and Ribeiro. Ribeiro, who's playing as the right wing, Ribeiro does not stay in an advanced position. He also wants to receive the ball in the pockets, right? And what has happened with Ribeiro specifically, the tape on him is out there for these teams, and these teams are planning around Lucas Ribeiro in terms of as soon as he receives the ball, the defense collapses on him. And what I saw from him is he then continued to go deeper to receive the ball. At some point, he was moonlighting as the DM or as the number 6, right? And if you have one of your forwards that far deep and you have another one deeper as well, what needs to happen essentially is your midfielders need to fill those spaces ahead. But that's not how the Sundowns midfielders play. Umkwena is the 6. He's not all that advanced. You had in that game Kulisa as well. You had Allende as well, and they don't really go into the box. You don't think of them the same way you think of, for example, a Castillo at Kaizer Chiefs, who makes those late runs into the box and becomes an auxiliary striker. So there's more balance when you then have a Matthews who comes in, and what you saw earlier in the season when it was Matthews, Reyners, and Ribeiro. Ribeiro is the creative, and Matthews and Reyners, they stretch the defense, they make the runs. Shalolile comes in as well. He's more comfortable in the box, and then he scores the header for the equalizer, and he forces the own goal to win that game. And all of that suggests to me that the coach is still figuring it out. And on a positive sense as well, in that game, the opposition really didn't create many chances. The goal was a mistake. It's the same goal you saw Ranga score against Mamelodi Sundowns, where those centre backs against a physical striker, they're a bit soft, to be honest. And I think this is true of football in general, right? Because we've got all these guys who are like ball playing centre backs, and in terms of that rough and tumble, they're not really about that life anymore. So when they come up against a striker who's physical, it's a hard knock for those defenders. But at the same time as well, the home Gwena, like he was giving instruction to one of his teammates while he's supposed to be falling back, and by the time he reacted, he did get next to the striker, but he got to him in the box. They want to foul him in the box, and then also like the finish was one you thought that Williams would save that, but he didn't. But for the majority of the game, the team didn't do much, which speaks to the positives of what Cardoso is doing. And he spoke about like his rest defense and just defensively wanting to be sound. And Sundowns defend on the front foot because they keep the ball most of the time. And there was a period as well before Maniema scored their goal where it looked magical, if I'm being very honest, Chuck. Like the rotations, you had Allende who's coming in from the right wing and he's central. You've got Morena also like coming up to the front. You had like the midfield push up to the edge of the box. And for a 10-15 minute spell, the opposition couldn't live with Mamelodi Sundowns. So that gives you hope if not confidence. It gives you hope as a Sundowns fan that when it does click, if Cardoso can get it to click, his football to click, it's going to be effective to the point where maybe you can have Sundowns as one of the favorites again for the Champions League. But when you do consider the close victories, the positive, as I'm saying, is that Sundowns were not conceding and it's hard to score against them. But you were relying on just a single goal in those matches. In this game, again, you conceded and you were relying on, which is a luxury, Shalulile to come off the bench and to give you those 2 goals, even though the other one was an own goal, as I mentioned. But there's enough there, as I'm saying, where you can hold on to some hope that they can be there in the latter stages, because the first goal, of course, is to secure that point against AS FAR Rabat and get out of the group stages. And you are as good as anybody else, it seems to me. And maybe there's an experience there within this team that will come up or will show up once you get into the knockout stages. I do think, though, Timbazwani, the more I watch Sundowns, is missed.
Yeah, I think the last point that you just put out there, I think that's a big thing, because I was about to say, Uti, Caruso is having the same problems that Mangoba had, and that's a lack of spark from Ribeiro, because obviously, right, Sundowns will dominate the ball. Obviously, Sundowns are still good enough. But sometimes you need someone to take that responsibility creatively, and then, because you know what he looks like when he's on song. He plays those through balls, he's scoring himself, and so he's a big game changer, a big game winner himself. And so sometimes these games are that tough that you need someone to step up and play at that level. And obviously, if it's not Timbazwani, then it has to be Ribeiro. So I think what he has to figure out is a space or a way to then be able to give Ribeiro more space on the ball, find a way to draw other players out and give him time on the ball, because, as you said, for him to drop deep, then he's not as effective in that part of the pitch versus being next to the box. So I think, Jay, the fact that Sundowns still dominate the ball, the fact that Sundowns still creating chances is good. But I think overall, the fact that they can grind out to win, because that's the characteristics that we see of Al Ahly. We would say, is this Al Ahly? Up until you get to the knockout phases, then you're like, okay, this is Al Ahly, because somehow they flick on the switch and they go into game time, into game mode, and they know how to win games. So I think the fact that you're still on course, obviously if you were out, it would be disastrous. But the fact that you're still on course with the game at home, all in your hands, I still think you guys are dangerous. And with the CAF Champions League being what it is, Jay, it's not a situation where you want to be finishing, or maybe you want to be finishing first, but what difference is it? Because everything is so tight, everything is so close. Because
no, Chuck.
You don't think so?
You prefer to finish first, because if you finish second, you get in one of the group winners.
That's true, but I'm saying if it's last 8 anyway, I think the other 7 teams are still strong as well. If it was the last 16, you'd prefer to have the weaker sides because someone weak would have come through. But with 8 remaining teams, I'd like to think that the top 2 teams of each group are decent enough.
So, for example, right, the group where Mazembe are last, like Yanga in that group.
Yeah.
If you ask me the question right now, I would prefer to play Yanga as opposed to Al Ahly in the knockout stages. Having said that, though, right, and I've said this before, and I suppose this is to give Sundowns the best chance of another round to get then to the semifinals. And in knockout football, anything can happen, right? But ultimately, if we're talking about winning the whole thing, you have to play everyone. You have to beat essentially everybody. Like whoever is standing at the end, you're gonna have to beat them at some point, right? And maybe actually it is worth playing one of the stronger teams in the quarterfinals, because
make it easier.
That's not to make it easier, to take away excuses that you can build in. Because if you win the quarterfinals, you're in the semifinals, and that's a great run in the Champions League to make it to the semifinals, right? But Chuck, if the goal is to win the thing, you can't hide behind the semifinals, especially because you are now the second coach who has been hired within the space of a season to win the champion, and the job is to win the Champions League. So, yeah, if you're gonna get knocked out in the quarterfinals and prove that you really weren't good enough. But I think for a team like a Pirates, who I think a semifinal would be a good result for Orlando Pirates, because they don't have the baggage that Sundowns have, having been in the tournament consecutively as long as they have, and failing to even make it back to the final, right? Then you maybe do want an easier path to the semifinal, and then it's gravy at that point. You're playing with house money. But okay, maybe I'm coming around to what you're saying, that with Sundowns specifically are concerned, it doesn't matter whether they finish first or second, because the goal remains the same.
Yeah. So I think with what they look like, Jay, they haven't fallen off, and obviously their league form is testament to that, in terms of they're still on top of their local league as well. So It's just a matter of them scoring goals in Africa, and I don't know what's plagued them in terms of not finding the back of the net in those games because they create chances, like we keep saying. Reynas wins a lot of games single handedly by scoring crucial goals. He hasn't scored enough of those in Africa. Stellies has to contribute. Shalili has to contribute. Ribeiro as well. So I think the coach is still trying to figure out his best team. Obviously he's new in the job. Mangoba chopped and changed and did whatever he did, and he's out of the job now. He's trying to figure out in terms of, okay, Ribeiro's not quite firing, but he's got Marcelo Allende playing quite well. He's got Tebogo Mokoena playing well as well. So I think it's a matter of finding what works for him on the continent. And I think you need those big bodies. I think someone like Obas was a big miss. That red card, I think, could have cost him. I think Kulsum Dao as well. So when you're in the space that you're in now, you need your big guns. And maybe it's rest for them. When you guys qualify, you go to the knockout round, those guys are back and they're ready to play. So I still think Sundowns are on course to have a good showing in the Champions League. They just don't look that convincing, but I do believe in them because of their track record.
The absence of the goals is because of the injury that happened to Matthews, and the reason I say that is if you look at even the goal tally of Sundowns in the PSL, in the earlier parts of the PSL, they were scoring a lot of goals, right? And that was the period where the front three was Reyners, Matthews, and Ribeiro. And Ribeiro is the one who drops deep, and it creates for them. You can think of the performance against. Ikalans. I believe it was against Ikalans, and how you see Matthews and Reyners through on goal by themselves, no defender near them, having beaten the offside trap, and it's Matthews to Reyners having gotten that through ball from Ribeiro. So after a 2-month stint on the sidelines, Matthews is back now. He's not quite found his legs as yet. He's coming back to that. And it's not just specifically Matthews, Chuck. As I'm saying, it's the personnel, right? Because that's the issue I have when you have Useles playing in the front three with Reyners and Ribeiro. You don't have final third entries as much as you do when you have someone like a Matthews who's a willing runner, or you have a Peter Shalulile who's gonna be there in the box. Because if you play with a Sellers and a Ribeiro and you have Reyners as just the out and out attacker, what you want is those numbers to come from the midfield. This is my personal opinion. I really want to see Tebogo Mokoena play as an 8. I don't want to see him play as a 6, and that's the curse of his talent, that he plays as the 6, because he's really good in that role. But I honestly want to see him further forward, where he is given the license to make runs into the box, and we know he has a penchant to shoot, right? And you want him in those positions, because if I borrow from what Coach Jose Rivera said about Umbata and his goals, he says that that's one of the ways to negate the low block, because when the ball goes to you and you are in that position as Umbata, those teams know that you have to account for him, because that could be a goal. And if then the teams are coming out to close him down, then there are spaces that open up, right? So this is the same thing we've seen from Tebogo Mokoena, like in his career, that when he gets into those positions, he's a shooter. And one of the things that we've noted is that the teams come against Sundowns, they play in that low block, and Sundowns have struggled to break down that low block. And so it's for that reason, but it's also because I do think Tebogo Mokoena is a goal scorer, is a goal scoring midfielder. And yes, he'll give you the box to box, where he will add those numbers in midfield as well, defensively, because of his athletic prowess, right? But I think if you have him as one of the options you have in attack, where he's a goal threat, I think that makes the Sundowns attack more dynamic, as opposed to if he does have to go to the edge of the box, he's coming from so far deep that it's not sustainable that he can do that on a regular or semi-regular basis. So I think some tweaks could result in Sundowns scoring more goals, as well as the addition of Matthews. Of course, Sundowns have confirmed, well, it's been reported that Jaden Adams did score his farewell goal for Stellenbosch, and is going to add numbers to an already stacked midfield at Sundowns. So we'll see how that one progresses. And Chuck, this is then a Stellenbosch team that Jaden Adams is leaving, but he leaves them having helped them qualify for the quarterfinals of the Confed. South African teams doing pretty well in Africa this season. But Chuck, at what cost, right, with regards to a team like Stellies? Stellies have only managed one win. I have to say it's against Orlando Pirates. They've only managed one win in their last 6 domestic games, including the Colin Cup, which they were knocked out by Marumo in that one. and they find themselves 14 points off the top of the log after only 11 games. Previously, we've seen Marumo Gallants get to the semifinals of the Confed and be relegated. We've also seen Orlando Pirates, last time they went to the Champions League final, they finished in 6th place in that particular season. So there seems to be a payoff that if you do well on the continent, you are going to suffer locally. And my question around that, where Stellies are concerned and the progress they've been making locally, having won a cup competition, finishing 3rd, is it worth it?
I think it is, Jay. And when I look at, I know you detailed case studies and you showed us Pirates and what they did and Chiefs and all that stuff and what they did in Africa versus what they did in the domestic league. And I think all that being true, I still want to look at this as its own case, as its own individual case, because there's no Reyners who's been sold. There's no Van Rooyen who's been sold. We don't know about Basadine. Mujela is injured as well. So those are factors that I think played a role in where they are in the league table right now, because at the back end of the last season, they finished quite strong, right? And if they were to go into a second stint in Africa, whether it's Confed, whether it's Champions League, and then this happens again, then we can say that obviously if you have your eye on Africa, then your league form suffers. But going to the natural or the general analogy of the fact that if you keep your eyes on Africa, you do suffer. I think I'll take that gamble. I mean, obviously, you don't want it to happen like Gallants, where you go all the way to the final, but then you get relegated, because that's catastrophic, right? But if you're Stellies, that's what you play for. You play for harder games. You play for more, not necessarily in that particular way, but you play for more glory. You play for more titles. You play for more tougher fixtures. You play to test yourselves and become better and better, because the only way that Stellies will ever rub shoulders with even at this point, a super sport, Amazulu, and become a big name, so if they do better than them, and that's going to Africa, that's playing against big opposition and winning things, then you're like, okay, Stellies belongs in a higher bracket. So I think as a new team in the PSL, relative, like they're 6 years old now, something like that, you want to do big things like that. So I think, Jay, it's worth it, one, because of financial returns. Number two, they don't seem to mind selling off their players. So the more experience and the more games that they play at a higher level, I'm sure you can demand more buck for that. So I think, Jay, the trade-off is quite harsh. You have to be able to manage that and not finish rock bottom and not be outside the top 8 places, because that's still more money for the next season in the MTN 8. But I think, all in all, that's what you play for as footballers. As much as we hear them complaining to play every 3 games, you want to be in the Champions League. You want to be in the Euros. You want to be in all these tough places. You want to be in the latter parts of the FA Cup. You want to play the Supercopa España. As much as you want to complain, that's the path to glory. And so these are teething problems if they're to be here more consistently. At some point, you'll do well in Africa, suffer locally. But when you have understood the task at hand and you know how to dot your I's and cross your T's, you want to do good at both parts of the race. You want to be where Sundowns are. Sundowns have figured it out. If they're doing it more consistently, that's winning the league and also being in CAF. So I think overall, my opinion is that it's good. It's a good trade-off. Just need to make sure that you don't go all the way down.
I think it depends who you are. I think it depends on the team. If you're going to get relegated, it's not worth it.
Yeah.
It is absolutely not worth it. If you're gonna get to the semifinals, and even when you win that prize money, because unfortunately those players, last I checked, they didn't get a share of the money because it was not promised to them, because the team didn't go into the season thinking they make the semifinals of the Confed. But what we've also heard reported is that the trade-off financially is because of the travel and the stay and everything else that's involved logistically, you don't actually make all that much money. I think you start seeing the benefit financially when you get to like the semifinals, and when you mention the financial part of it, because that's a big thing, particularly here at home, and on the continent. So if Stellies do go to like the semifinals or finals or win it, then happy days. Because I think if you win the tournament, you get $2 million, if not $4 million, and that's a great big windfall, for any of the PSL teams. Sundowns, who charter flights for their players and put them on a private jet to get from representing Bafana at that to come home to represent their club, that's different, right? They live in a different world. So Stellies being down where they are in the league, where seemingly they're not challenging for the title, and you wondered, are you going to push towards that after the season they had last season and finishing in 3rd place? And also doesn't look like they'll be there in 3rd place again to qualify once again for the Confed, because a reminder in terms of how Marumo got to the semifinals of the Confed to even qualify is because they got to the final of the Nedbank Cup, which they lost to Sundowns, and Sundowns, of course, were already in the Champions League, so that spot went to Marumo. So if it is a team like a Stellies, where their qualification, yes, it could be by getting to the final, winning a cup, but it happened via league position, and now they're suffering in terms of the league position. But not so much that Stellies are going to get relegated. I think, Chuck, it is worth sacrificing a season in order to have the sojourn on the continent. And the reason I say that is because if you are continuing to grow the league and you are continuing to expand your ambitions as this club, that does include crossing into other frontiers, right? Let's go play in Africa. Let's go have that experience. Let's go see what we have. Let's go see what players we have. Let's go showcase our players. Maybe someone comes in and like from the north, we've seen the northern teams have been shopping in the PSL, comes in for our player. And again, financially, that's something that counts. That's why Stellies are selling to Sundowns, right? Because that's money that they welcome from Mamelodi Sundowns. Or there are other teams beyond the continent who then take note of you, because what happens in the Confed and in the Champions League in those latter stages, it reverberates around the world. It's not just like on the continent where they're paying attention, but as well in terms of the experience of what does it take to be able to compete on both fronts. Because Mamelodi Sundowns, the last time they did not win the PSL title was the same season that they won the Champions League. And they were right there to win the title, but then they suffered later on in the season because the number of games came back to bite them in the you-know-what, right? And Wits went on to win the league that season. But Sundowns have not managed to win the league since then and have continued to perform well in the Champions League. Why? Because they had experience. Because now you get to learn, how do we maintain our form at home and continue to do well on the continent? What does rotating look like? What does rest look like? What things that you had never thought about with regards to your planning and phasing out how your season goes. Now these are things that you become accustomed to. Now these are things that you have experience of because you've been there and you've done it. So I think this season, Stellies will finish like 6th, 7th, or 8th, right? And make it to the semis or the finals, or hopefully win the Confed. But then you come back next season and you now know, how do we compete in the league, and we continue our ambitions in winning domestic cup competitions like we've already done, and we get back in a continental competition and do well there. And I think for the growth of the game in this country, we do need our teams to do well in the Champions League. You were talking to me about it off air in terms of we have a different approach now and attitude to the Champions League because of what Sundowns have been able to have managed to do on the continent, consistently being there, being in the quarters, being in the semis, being mentioned as one of the teams that you look out for in terms of winning the whole thing. And now when Pirates come into the Champions League, it's not just, oh man, it's great that Pirates have finally made it into the group stages. Let's make it out of the group stages and let's go further in the competition. And there's that expectation not only from the fans but also from the teams themselves. And I think overall it's growth. So I think if you are, as I'm saying, a team that's gonna be like, maybe you make a fairy tale run to the Nedbank Cup final and then in the Confed and you do like Amorim and you go far but you get relegated, it's not worth it for those teams. But I think for teams that have greater ambitions, your Pirates, Sundowns, Chiefs, Stellenbosch, Cape Town City, SuperSport previously, Kokune, who now, unfortunately, they got knocked out before they went into the group stages, but who are continuously doing well and are consistent in doing well. And you see in the ambition of the players that they're getting as well. You know, for those teams, I think it is worth it, Chuck, even if it means growing pains at the beginning.
Yeah, man, let's see what they make of it. Hopefully they don't go all the way down to get relegated, but I think they're strong enough to stay up. And I think it's a good time to be a South African football fan because Bafana's doing well, our local clubs are doing well on the continent. Obviously, Chiefs is a caveat, but generally speaking,
we are back up.
Yeah.
Put the word out there that South Africa is back up.
Jay, before we leave the shores of South Africa, we didn't go to Orlando to watch Paris, but we were instead at the Wanderers Cricket Stadium to watch Joburg Super Kings against my Mumbai Indians, Cape Town.
MI Cape Town.
Okay, we know the franchise.
It's
Okay,
such a ridiculous name, like, and this was a question on social media. It's like, well, the moment the Mumbai franchise came here, it was
Yeah.
gonna be that, right?
Yeah.
Because the others you can just substitute the name for Chennai, for Delhi, whatever the case may be. But for the Mumbai Indians, because what do you say, Mumbai Cape Townians, like Cape Town Indians? That you can't say that.
Like
That
Cape Town is the only way it works. But we know who they are.
the Mumbai
Okay,
Indian Cape Towns.
let me rephrase. JSK, Joburg Super Kings, played in my Cape Town at the Wanderers Stadium. We were there to watch the first game in Joburg for JSK, and it was fanfare. Jay. It was a great event. Never mind the cricket itself, because it's so much to do before the actual game starts. There was a bit of grey clouds, and you're thinking, is the rain going to interrupt? But all in all, we saw enough cricket to be happy. What was your experience like, Jay, when you entered through those gates and you had a day of cricket?
I feel like I had the actual real experience of what the SA20 is about. Like, it has really created a buzz, right, in the local game. And Graham Smith, the commissioner, he was on Cricinfo with an interview with Fred Rose, our very own Fred Rose, who reports for Cricinfo. Brilliant. And talking about the differences between the SA20 and the ILT20, which is happening in the UAE at the same time, where a majority of the players that play in that league, they're from overseas, whereas here the majority is South African players. You see then the youngsters like Pretorius, who scored a 97 over the weekend. There's Keegan Leon Cachet for the Pretoria Capitals, and you see Mapaka, you see Ngaba Peters at PAL, and what they are then doing, the excitement around those youngsters and being exposed to the international players. And it is like a local tournament, right? And with an infusion of international flair. And it's whipped up a frenzy amongst the South African public, and like it's injected some juice into like our local game where cricket is concerned. And then Chuck, being there though, at the stage, because this is our first like SA20 game I've attended like in the flesh, third season, late to the party, yes, but finally made it there. And being there, I got the full sense of the circus. And I say that in the best of ways, right? There is so much happening even outside of the game. And we know what the T20 game has brought to cricket, right? And the fact that it is the IPL franchises and what the IPL has been able to do for cricket, and them being here. And then, as I'm saying, when you're at the stadium, there are games, there are activations, there are celebrities. There's just it's just the carnival atmosphere that you walk into. And then, as I'm saying, there's the whole advent of what the game is and the excitement of, you're not just there to watch, like, yes, you're excited to see maybe a Joe Root, but that's not all who you're going to see. For the most part, you're going to see the local talent. And this makes you excited when you consider, yes, it took as long as it did, I think over a decade for India to then win like the World Cup in the T20. But that is a direct result of what the IPL has been able to do, not only just for cricket but for the national team. And you think, as I mentioned, these youngsters and the exposure that they're getting, at some point, also because at some point, because we've been waiting for so long, the Proteas are going to win one of these things, right? Point. They're going to win, particularly talking about the T20 World Cup, because those young players, they're going to get to a World Cup. They're going to get to the international stage. They're not going to be overwhelmed and overawed by the occasion because they've played against these guys. Like, they've shared dressing rooms with these guys. They belong at this level. But so the cricket itself and what it's doing for a local game, but also on the spectator side, the fanfare side, being there in person, as I said, I got to see my crush. It was a great day all around, Chuck. It was a great day all around.
I'll say this, Jay. The spectacle itself matches up to all the advertising, all the hype surrounding the actual tournament, because you get there and it does not disappoint. From the moment you walk through the gates, Jay, there's the clown guys standing on stilts doing balloons. There's, as you're saying, freebies. There's activations. There's food all around you. Before the game has even started, there's just a buzz around the stadium.
You get to test out your arm and your batting skills for a prize.
You feel like you're there for a good time. You're not just there to watch. You're there for a good time. And that all happens before the game actually even starts. So by the time my Cape Town came to bat, they had scored, like 3 runs in 2 overs, like Rasi for the Justin and Riza. What are you guys doing? Because they toiled out there. That's the first innings, right? And I mean, I felt like I wanted my money's worth because I was waiting for the six to come my way and catch the ball, but they were so
That's the
woeful.
other thing.
They were so
When you are there
woeful.
in person, you get a chance at a share of 2 million rand.
That's a lot of money. I mean, even if 10 other people catch it after you, that's still a lot of money. And that aspect of the game keeps your eyes glued on the game because you want to know if they're hitting the ball, is it coming my way or not? Because you want to be aware, right? So that is a good incentive in terms of keeping your eyes on the game. Obviously, there's fireworks, there's music, there's dances. It's a festival of cricket, Jay. Whenever there's a four, you're part of the celebration. You're doing the four gestures or six or whatever. You are part of the experience. And so I just feel like SA20 is a great franchise. When they say that it's the next best thing after the IPL, I believe it. Um, great for JSK to win as the home team as well because they came through in the second innings. They played quite well. They played their shots. They didn't hit sixes our direction, unfortunately. But I think all in all, Jay, you leave the stadium thinking, damn, I want to do that again because like I said, you've got like 20 different stands to choose from in terms of food. There is, as you said, activations. There's fun for the entire family. It's not just for the guys or the boys, the oaks. The ladies are there, the kids are there, the old toppies are there, abomdala are there, black or white. You feel like I belong in this particular environment because we tend to know, Jay, with the rugbies and crickets, they're more for the fairer type of our nation and the soccer's for the darker of our nation or whatever. But SA20 has got the marketing right, number one. It's got the superstars right because when you say Joe Root, equally you can say Kaktorabara. When you say Brevic, you can equally say Ngabapita, and you're like, I want to see those guys play. Not only that, but then when you get there, you're like, okay, this is for everyone. So, all in all, as you say, we were late to the party, but what a good show it was.
It was a great show indeed. It wasn't a great show, I guess, if you are an Arsenal fan. Was in the FA Cup. The defending champions Manchester United knocked out Arsenal after playing with 10 men for the best part of an hour and taking it to penalties and winning 5-3 in the penalty shootout. Beginning with Arsenal, Chuck, should there now be pressure on Mikel Arteta after being knocked out by Manchester United in the third round of the FA Cup?
I think there should be because, Jay, when you look at the fact that the back of most recent forms, obviously it's the loss to Man United, it's the loss to Newcastle as well in the Carabao Cup. They might just turn that around and qualify. We don't know. But generally, the feeling around Arsenal that you guys were flying high the last two seasons, you were pushing City close, and you want more. There must be an end to it, and a glorious end in terms of lifting some sort of silverware. And on the brink of the Carabao Cup, in terms of exiting out of the FA Cup, and now to order to catch Liverpool at the top of the Premier League. So it's demanding, and the question is, can Arteta, is he the guy to deliver results? And I pose that question because, Jay, for the longest time, we've known that you cannot maintain the Martinelli, Saka, Havertz scoring. You need a central recognized striker who's going to carry the burden. It's not Jesus. It's not definitely not Havertz. Not after the weekend's display because he missed a lot of chances, a lot of clear cut chances, a lot of chances in the 18-yard area, in the 6-yard area. Like, dude, hit the target, Gately. Just hit the target you guys go through. And to be honest with you, when Dalo was sent off for the second yellow card, I was like, I don't even want to watch this game. I know how it's going to end because soon after that, you guys equalized, and I was like, the writing's on the wall. But for the mere fact the game kept going on and on and on, I was like, where's Arsenal's killer instinct? I was actually surprised we got all the way to penalties, to be honest with you. And that's more on Arsenal being bad than it is United being resilient because obviously they also need to change the game because they need to win the game just as much as Arsenal do. But they're a man down, and so obviously there will be space to be exploited. The space was there to be exploited, but the finishing was woeful. So I think as someone who needs to find solutions, because we've always been saying, if Saka goes down, what's your plan B? If Martinelli isn't your preferred winger, is it Trossard? What do you have in terms of your midfield options? And I think he needs to answer that, but either by the youth that he's put in, Abonwane, Raboskeli, or does he go into the transfer market and make this team win something? So question marks do need to arise because seemingly they've just flatlined and they're just playing football. They're not as good as we know them to be.
So that result is on the players, and when you have Kai Havertz doing what he's doing.
Yeah,
the question I was like, what's the coach supposed to do in that situation?
Sub.
When you have Declan Rice, and Declan Rice had one of his better games, right? But when he's in the box, you can see it's not really comfortable being in that position. And then you have a penalty miss, or great save from Bayenda, and he had a great game for Manchester United, by the way. You get given a penalty, you steal a penalty, and you don't convert it. What's the coach supposed to do in that situation? Except for the fact, Chuck, this one time, I do come back to the coach because those are your players, all right? You mentioned the fact that Arsenal were flying high for 2 seasons, finishing in second place both seasons behind Manchester City. And at the end of last season, the players cut a devastated look after not managing to win the title on the last day, City doing it again. And Arteta made the promise that Arsenal are going to be back, right? And there was a feeling that coming into this season, they're going to do it. But then you have Liverpool flying high, and every time Liverpool do open up the door a little bit, Arsenal falter. They draw, they lose. And with the foundation or the bedrock of the last 2 seasons and what you did, Arsenal, who are historically frugal, that board gave Mikel Arteta and Edu, who's now since departed, a blank check. You went and you signed a grafter for 100 million. You went and you signed a project for 60 million. And then you went and you signed a defender who is injury prone at the moment. With that opportunity, and then with the opportunity of the financial injection for you, because you essentially, you imagine the conversation was, we are right there with City in terms of the football. What we need is to match them in terms of what they do in the transfer market. We need the money, and the board said, here's the money. And you went and you spent it on who you spent it on. And now you have a situation where Saka goes down with injury. There's no real backup for Saka, even though Noneri now is proving to be that. Odegaard was out for an extended period of time. Noneri, the 17-year-old, once again was the one looked to fill in that hole. You didn't go and sign someone who is going to do that job. Oh yeah, as well. And in midfield, you signed Mourinho. You went to Real Sociedad. You watched their midfield, and you said, I want that one. And the one you pointed out was not the one you were supposed you were supposed to get. You went and you got Mourinho, and Mourinho looks a little lost, if I'm being very honest, because we don't quite know. Is he a 6? Is he an 8? Is he supposed to fill in as the 10? We don't quite know, right? And now there's a situation where Jesus seems to have done his ACL. You cannot rely on Kai Havertz because we saw what happened over the weekend. Martinelli, he tries. He'll always try, but he's reached the ceiling, right? And you look around, and who are the players to come in to raise the ceiling? And now you're talking about you have to go buy. And yes, Arsenal do have to go buy, but you weren't supposed to be in a position where you have to go buy another attacker because you were given so much money, and that's what you chose to spend it on, And as a result, Chuck, you have to then look at the coach. And for me, where we are is, if we get to May and Arsenal are not lifting either the Premier League or the Champions League, we have to have some real conversations around how far is this coach going to take this team, or how is it going to be another Netflix season? Like, are we still waiting for next season? The only counter I'll give to that, Chuck, right, is this: what are Arsenal? If you're looking at a team that has not won a league title in 21 years and have never lifted a Champions League, finishing in second place, you might make the argument that's the level, right?
That's what they do.
Are they miscast as a absolute giant? They really are one of the big teams, right? But as I'm saying, when you look at those numbers and you start asking the question, if what you are measuring them by is a team that haven't won the title, as I'm saying, in 2 decades and have never lifted a Champions League, Arteta's doing a stellar job. And that's what Arsenal need to define, right, in terms of what team are they. Because this is why I got off the Wenger bandwagon, because when you go from being invincibles and now you're talking about finishing in 4th place is an achievement. And yes, we understand that they built the stadium and Wenger was pulling economic magic in order to sustain that whole project and keep Arsenal competitive. But I don't really care about that. Like, when you have been styled as one of the absolute big teams, you were the main rival to Manchester United in the early parts of the Premier League. At a point, you were actually the second most successful team league titles-wise behind Liverpool before United overtook everybody. And if that is the team we're talking about, who's won doubles in the past, have been invincibles and were disappointed to not win Champions League titles, and one of their players not felt you being robbed when they did not get awarded the Ballon d'Or, then the coach of that team, you should look at him in a way whereby you are underachieving if you're not winning any of the big titles after 5-6 seasons in the job. But if, Chuck, it's a matter of, we're happy to be in the Champions League, then he's doing a stellar job.
I mean, in a recording that did not see the light of day, you did say with your bold prediction that maybe Arsenal go all the way to win the Champions League. I don't know how you're feeling about
They
that one
have to,
now.
Chuck. They have to. He has to, or I don't know, or Liverpool capitulate historically. But that's the thing. I don't trust Arsenal to make good on that if they get given that advantage because they've not been able to do so this season.
I mean, look, I think to answer your question of what is Arsenal, what we need to define is obviously since the last time they won the league, and you're saying with the invincible season and doubles and stuff like that, it's been like a banter period in terms of you're nearly man, you're almost always there, or you just make top four. That's all good for you guys, but that's not what it is. But with the marketing of the Premier League and what we've seen from these teams historically, it's not just a two-horse race in perpetuity. It can't just be City and Liverpool. Someone has to rise up. If it's not United, if it's not Chelsea, it has to be Arsenal. And if they've come to finish second twice in a row, they have to make it a leap to the next level. Win something. Not if not the league itself. Win a Carabao Cup. Look, I know, shamelessly so, right? At some point, we're like, Carabao Cup. But now, when you're desperate, you need a Carabao Cup. You can take that, right? When you're desperate, you take an FA Cup. Win something, is what I'm saying. After all that huffing and puffing, after all of that, because we got to believe in Arteta and his boys. After all those signs, we got to believe that, they can rise to the business or whatever it is. Get something for the work. Get something to reward yourself in terms of we've scaled the mountain. Here's what we have to show for it. Second place, you've got nothing to show for it. So I think what Arsenal need to show that they are is winners. Win something. Come back and beat Newcastle. Come back and be in the title race. Win the Champions League. Do something. Because if not, then no one remembers Arteta and his boys. It's like another era gone in that decade.
Unless you view Arsenal as just a really good team and not an elite team. Then you remember this. But yeah, Chuck, the Carabao Cup. Someone said it's a tin cup until you are desperate to win it. then you have something in the coffers, right? You have something in the cupboard. But like I agree with you, he has to win something. This season, what we're talking about is coming back from a 2-0 deficit against Newcastle to try win, make it to the final and win the Carabao, or to come back from the deficit with Liverpool to win the title, or to go and do something you've never been able to do, and that is win a Champions League, having only made one final, which is now 19 years ago. So there is pressure. And I think if May comes and goes and also are not popping the bubbly, uncomfortable conversations need to happen. Chuck, the opponent on the day, Manchester United, of course, defending FA Cup champions. They'll be very happy to have come through with the result. And I have to ask, because they are defending this title, but of course they have newish managers still in the job, right? And this is the first part of the rebuild, which is a massive rebuild at Manchester United. But this season, coming off of the positive result in the FA Cup against Arsenal, what would represent a successful season for Ruben Amorim in his first season as Manchester United manager?
I think getting more of those displays, like we did against Arsenal. Yes, we were holding on, but we did. We were competent defensively. Yes, there were chances that they should have scored and put away for us to be out the cup, but we weren't because we tried to fight. There was some fight in us, right? Then obviously there's the Liverpool result as well. What would be successful for Ruben Amorim is to get the fight, the passion back. Like we see in the fans, want to see it replicated on the pitch as well in terms of everyone's giving their all. Wanted to be passionate, wanted to be aggressive, want to have a team that wants to win again, So I think one, that, two, be competitive in the league. I think the words of Oli echo very well in terms of sometimes these trophies don't quite represent what's actually happening in the club, because we've won Carabao Cup, we've won FA Cup, but when you look back at the league campaign, you're like, but this team is all over the place. And I think if they can play a decent brand of football where they can translate and say, rather, to concisely put my idea together, is that when we can then say, this is Ruben Amorim football. And by the time the season ends, we're like, okay, these are the best players to play Ruben Amorim football, and it's giving us results. That'll be successful, because we're out of the Carabao Cup. I don't know how much weight I'd put in the FA Cup at this point, because we've been there, done that, and not necessarily looked good while doing that. So I think success for Man United means us playing the Ruben Amorim style of play and be as good as us, not a sporting and win the league and dominate, but push. Let's finish close to City, because they're not in their best. Let's finish close to City. Let's try capture top four. I think if we're playing good football and we are top four, maybe in Europe, but not the Conference League, not that. Europa and Champions League. If we can get there while having adopted and understood the style of football, that's success.
No, Chuck. Manchester United should absolutely not qualify for the Europa. Confed? No,
Europa Conference.
Conference.
Yeah.
The Conference League.
It's a waste of time.
is no. The Conference League is one that they can qualify. I'll tell you why. That I would not want United to qualify for the Europa in terms of this project, right? If you play Europa or Champions League, you have to play your best players midweek,
Okay.
and you. What might be a benefit for Manchester United, if that is the case, is you get to have them play together more and build up chemistry. But what you get with the conference, what you see with Chelsea, is that they don't play their best players. And one of the reasons the main reason Arsenal came seemingly out of nowhere to finish in second place, even though they choked away that season, they were on top for long parts of that season 2 seasons ago, is because they didn't have midweek games. All they had to focus on was the Premier League, right? And I think with Ruben, Amorim, and Manchester United trying to get them back to, first of all, a team that is in the Champions League, and then there's going to be challenging for the title. I think a season where you don't have to commit your main players to midweek games is a benefit. That's the reason as well Chelsea are having a good season in the Premier League, because their main players, they don't play in the conference league, right? And what you get to do as well is then get to see your depth. So I think where Manchester United find themselves, this season is a wash, right? And I don't even think there's pressure really to win a trophy, even though they've advanced now again in the FA Cup, which they are defending. They do have an FA Cup from last season. They have a Carabao from the season before that, but it's felt hollow because there's still been a underlying feeling that there's no progress happening at this club, right? So there's no pressure on this coach to win a cup, because Manchester United have recently won a cup.
Do you not think so, Jay? With the staff getting fired and Ratcliffe penny pinching, I'm sure windfall from a cup win.
There's no windfall from the cup win, not over there, Chuck. The windfall is from making it into the Champions League and getting the Champions League TV money. Okay. So, and I think that should be the focus, that we as Manchester United need to come in next season with an aim to qualify for the Champions League. So what then Ruben Amorim wants to do this season, as you are saying, essentially is you treat this season as a trial, right? What you want to see is who's got the heart for this. And Ruben Amorim is on the record speaking about this, like who's in it. Like, let's see who is in it. Let's see who can play in the system. And then come the summer transfer window, you know who you're getting rid of. You know who you are keeping. You know who are your leaders in the dressing room. You know who you are getting. And then there is a base for the project, and the players that you are adding, the hope is that they can hit the ground running because they are suited for how the coach wants to play. And those who remain, because they've proven that they can play there, and they've also proven their mindset with regards to ultimately where this coach wants to get Manchester United. So I think for me, success is have a run in the FA Cup just to continue to see more of these players. But I think what you're looking for is consistency, more consistency. You can't have performances against the big teams, and then when you're playing against, quote unquote, the smaller teams, you're capitulating. You know, you can't have that. You want to see Manchester United be competitive in every single game that they find themselves in, and you want to get to the end of the season, and then the project kicks off afresh in the new season, with then those loftier goals in terms of let's get back into the Champions League and get closer to being a team that challenges for the title and gets back into Champions League, into the Champions League picture. All right, we close the show, Chuck, with a rematch that's coming up in February that's been confirmed. That is Artur Beterbiev, who is taking on Bivol. What's Bivol's name? Dimitri Bivol, in Bivol2. Of course, in the first of those light heavyweight title bouts, you had Beterbiev come through as the winner in maybe a controversial decision where some people like Shakur Stevenson had Bivol winning that matchup. But now that we are getting the second fight between Bivol and Beterbiev, do you see it going the same way, or do you see a different result in favor of Dimitri Bivol?
I've heard it said, I think it's more, I think in combat sports, that if ever there's a rematch between a young, okay, Beterbiev is a bit old, but Bivol is not a spring chicken himself. But whenever there's a rematch between an old buck and a younger guy, usually the younger guy wins the rematch. I don't know what the metrics of that are.
And that is why Floyd Money Mayweather was like, after Canelo, deuces,
I'm good.
not trying to do this again. And he'll always have that on his record that he beat Canelo.
Yep.
Canelo didn't beat him, but we'll never know if they had another go what that would have looked like.
And so with that in mind, I think this obviously maybe may lean towards Bivol because I had Bivol winning the first one. But the thing is, though, Artur Beterbiev looked so strong, so durable that you think to yourself, what more could Bivol have done on that night, and what more can he bring in the rematch? You know, so it's still like even standing for me, Jay, in terms of I don't know who to pick because Beterbiev's got the power, Bivol's got the boxing acumen and the technique, but they're both elite fighters. So in terms of what I like to see, especially because Bivol is so hard to hit, he's so strong. I want to see him fall at some point. That's the thing, right? You scale the mountain high enough, well, you'll have haters. I want to see him fall. And so I picked Bivol to win this one, but it's still evenly poised.
Yeah, Chuck, I think we go the same way we did with Canelo and Triple G in those fights, that the feeling was Triple G won the first fight. But when they did fight subsequently, Canelo was the superior fighter. And that is that the other old adage in boxing, that the boxer, if he gets another look or continuous looks at the puncher, he will then come out on top eventually. Also because you've now experienced the power. You know, you know it. You've tasted it yourself, and you know you can live with it because they went the distance, right? And with then that tactical noose on Bivol's side, the ring general that he is, I imagine that he comes out on top in this one. So I think the experience of being in the ring with Beterbiev and having felt his power and knowing that you can withstand it, also being able to come up with a game plan, which in the first fight, as I'm saying, there's an argument that you won the fight, so you were that close. And if you then get a chance to look at the tape along with your trainers and what you have been able to do, what you've been able to put on tape for the rest of the world to see in terms of your prowess as a technician, you go into that fight and you are fairly confident that you'll be able to solve the puzzle that up to this point has yet to be solved. But as well, in that first fight, that's the first time that Bertebiev had gone the distance, right? Yep. So if then there is a man to finally put him on the canvas or put an L next to his name, you imagine it's going to be this guy, one of the all-time greats, both of them, for that matter. It's an exciting fight that is shaping up before us, but I do think that the technician in this one will come out on top.
Look, Beterbiev also said that he can perform better, and he's going to look to shout out his lights. So we'll see what that one brings. Obviously, as you said, both guys are looking to do better and tweak a bit of their game plan and see how much better they can perform in the rematch. But I picked Bivol, but I know it's going to be a hard job to get Beterbiev, put Beterbiev away.
We will see how that one ends up. And of course, as always, we'll be right back here to talk about it. And you can join us right back here. If you do enjoy these videos and you have not yet done so, please subscribe to the channel. Please like, comment, and share the content far and wide. We do see the interaction, we do see the support, we see the love, and we appreciate it. Please continue to do so. And if you want to continue the conversation with us, even on social media, you can find us across all platforms. It is at 2upfront pod. You can find me at J_Mzulu. Chuck is at Chuck2up. For myself, Jay, I'm outie.
We saw football. Some was good, some was bad, but ultimately highlights of our weekend, SA20.
No, ultimate highlights is seeing my crush.
At the SA20.
At the SA20, yes.
If you go to SA20, either you'll get good cricket or you get to see your crush. Let's go out and enjoy the tournament. Chuck, and I'm out.